Before we begin this journey through Book of Numbers, I want to invite you to open your heart and mind to something that can transform your perspective on faith, discipline, and purpose. If you're looking to understand why the desert walk took so long and how this story applies to your life today, stay with me until the end. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this content with anyone who also needs to hear this message. After all, knowledge's power in this journey is just beginning. Have you ever wondered why people who saw the sea part, ate bread that fell from the sky, and drank water from a rock took 40 years to cross a desert that could have been crossed in weeks? Well, Book of Numbers holds deep and often overlooked secrets about this intriguing journey. Here, we're not just talking about sand, heat, and pilgrimage. We're talking about divine purposes, human choices, invisible tests, and daily miracles that shaped an entire nation. Many people skip this book, thinking it's just a list of names and numbers. But inside are revelations that explain why so many miracles in the desert ended in severe judgments, and how the obedience to God, a camp organization, and the performance of Levites in the tabernacle of meeting reveal an extremely detailed divine structure, one that speaks directly to our lives today. Yes, there are even laws about women suspected of adultery and bitter waters that reveal zeal for justice and purity in the camp. And hey, raise a warning, understand the history of Numbers will change the way you view the Old Testament. This book reveals principles of order, holiness, and spiritual leadership that still make the difference between walking in circles and moving forward toward the promise. That's why I invite you to dive with me, step by step, on this journey as if we were walking alongside Moses, Aaron, the priests, and Levites, sob as flags the tribes of Israel. Brace yourself. What you're about to discover has perhaps never been explained like this before. And in the end, you may be surprised to realize that this 40-year journey may be happening inside you. Right at the beginning of the Book of Numbers, God gives an order that, at first glance, seems purely administrative to count the men of Israel. But this count was not just for record-keeping, it was a spiritual and strategic summons. God wanted an organized army, ready to conquer Promised Land. But I also wanted to teach something bigger. The order and discipline of the people are essential to living his plans. The census counted 603, 550 men over 20 years old, all fit for war. It was as if the Lord were saying, "You have been freed from Egypt, now you must prepare to fight for the promises." And this was no ordinary battle. It was a journey full of challenges, where faith and obedience will be tested. This impressive number also demonstrated how the nation grew even in the midst of suffering. God transformed slaves into warriors. But there's a curious detail. The tribe of Levi was left out of this military census. Why? Because the Levites had a completely different mission: serve in the tabernacle of meeting, take care of sacred things, and maintain the sanctity of the sanctuary. They did not go to war with swords, but with reverence. This teaches us in the kingdom of God, every role has unique value, whether with spears or with prayer. This census also challenges us to think, are we ready for the battles of our lives? Or are we still standing in the desert, waiting for a sign? God calls us to emerge from passivity. If he told us to count, it's because he expected action. Sometimes we need to stop and look at who is with us, who is standing, and who is willing. This principle applies to your home, your business, your ministry. It all begins with clarity, purpose, and readiness. In the midst of the people with more than 600,000 men ready for war, God separates an entire tribe for a completely different service, the Levites. While others prepare to face enemies with shields and swords, the Levites are called to care for what is most precious, the presence of God in the tabernacle. It wasn't a privilege, it was a responsibility. They were appointed to the tabernacle service, something so sacred that any carelessness could cost lives. This mission included assemble, disassemble, load, and protect everything that was part of the tabernacle of meeting, the spiritual center of the camp. Imagine each time the people moved through the wilderness. It was a tribe of Levi that led the spiritual transition, ensuring that God's dwelling place was safe and intact. What's more, only they could approach the holy places. Any stranger who tried to approach was worthy of death. This sounds harsh, but it reveals something powerful. God is holy, and dealing with the sacred requires preparation and reverence. Therefore, the Levites are not in the tabernacle, represented this bridge between the human and the divine. They live close to God's presence, literally. Their camp surrounded the sanctuary, like a spiritual wall protecting the people from the danger of approaching something they could not bear. They guarded what was most pure. And here is a practical lesson. Not everyone is called to be on the front lines, but everyone has a mission with eternal weight. Sometimes, your silent role organizing, caring, interceding just what keeps the house standing. The Levites remind us of this. It doesn't matter if your name doesn't make the headlines. If you carry the presence, you carry everything. In the middle of the desert, where everything seemed chaotic, God brought structure. Camp organization off Israel was not left to chance. Each tribe had its place, its direction, its purpose. Imagine more than 2 million people camped with millimeter precision, everything revolving around the tabernacle of meeting. This order was not aesthetic. It was a living lesson. Life with God demands discipline, position, and alliance. The tribes were divided into 4 large groups, each positioned at a cardinal point. East were Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, with 186 for 100 men leading the marches. Tune the Reuben, Simeon, and Gad with 151 for 50 men. No West, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin with 108, 100 men. And to the north, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali with 157,600 men. Nothing was random. Each number revealed planning and trust in divine command. In the center, as the beating heart of the people, stood the tabernacle, surrounded by the Levites. This teaches us something profound. God must be at the center of our lives, and everything else is organized around him. Flags of the tribes fluttered not just as symbols of identity, but as reminders that each family was part of something much larger. It was as if God were saying, if you know your place, you'll know where to go. If we apply this today, the lesson is clear. Without order, even the best talent are lost. Sometimes what's missing in our lives isn't faith, it's organization. Book of Numbers shows that miracles in the desert happen when there is order and discipline of the people. And what's more, when God is at the center, even the driest path blossoms with direction. Now, with everything in place, the journey could begin. But what about spiritual leadership? We'll talk about that next. Amidst so much structure and logistical details, there was one role that required even more care: the priesthood. And this role was entrusted to the family of Aaron, Moses' brother. Priests and Levites not only performed sacrifices, they bore the responsibility of representing the people before God. It was a calling of honor, but also of risk. A slip in the tabernacle service could cost one's life. That's exactly what happened to Nadab and Abihu, sons of Aaron. They offered strange fire, something not authorized by God, and were instantly consumed. It may seem harsh, but this scene illustrates the extent to which sanctity of the sanctuary needed to be taken seriously. The message was clear: serving God requires reverence, not improvisation. It's not about quick fixes, but about aligning with divine will. After the death of the brothers, the children Eleazar and Ithamar assumed the priesthood. They learned through pain the importance of obeying every instruction with precision. Their spiritual service directly impacted the entire nation. Imagine the responsibility if they made a mistake. The entire people suffered. This makes us wonder, how often do our actions, even in silence, influence everyone around us? Today, there may not be curtained tabernacles and sacred objects to carry, but the principle remains: obedience to God and spiritual responsibility are still central. You may be called to intercede, lead, serve. The important thing is to do so with a pure heart and awareness of the impact. Aaron's priesthood was not just a title. It was a daily reminder that God's presence demands zeal. And, as we will see, this connects with another powerful principle: the substitution of firstborn sons. When God delivered the people from death in Egypt, he declared, "Every firstborn of Israel is mine." It was an act of consecration, a living reminder of the deliverance on Passover night. But in Book of Numbers, God does something amazing. He replaces the firstborn of all the tribes with Levites. The exchange was not symbolic, it was literal. Each Levite became a firstborn before God. This substitution shows a fascinating principle: God values representation and fair replacement. The Levites became the spiritual first fruits of the people, dedicated exclusively to tabernacle service. It's as if they were saying, we are here on behalf of each family, serving the Lord. The interesting thing is that God did the math. Yes, literally. He asked them to count the Levites and compare them with the firstborn of the other tribes. In total, there were 22,000 Levites and 22,273 firstborn. The result? 273 Levites were missing to cover all the firstborn. And what did God command? That each of the additional 273 be redeemed with silver 5 shekels per head. This teaches us about restitution and divine justice. Even what seems small is important before God. Nothing is left out of balance, not even a single number. It's the mathematics of holiness. If we look at this today, the message is strong. What God separates, He also sustains and calculates with precision. Sometimes we think He's forgotten the details of our lives, but He sees even the extra 273 souls. He wants our best. And He also wants us to let us honor what has been given to us with dedication and accuracy now that the Levites are officially in the place of firstborn. It is time to understand how each of their families had a specific function. Within the tribe of Levi, each family received a specific mission. Nothing was random in the desert. There was purpose even in the distribution of duties. The Gersonian, for example, they took care of the curtains, veils, and cords of the tabernacle. They camped at West, always ready to disassemble and assemble the textiles of the sanctuary. It may seem like a minor task, but without them, there would be no covering for God's presence. Yekodinesh had an even more delicate responsibility, transporting the most sacred objects to the Ark of the Covenant: the table of showbread, the lampstand, the altars, and holy utensils. They camped at Adonai, and their service was performed with extreme care. Before touching any item, the priests covered everything with sacred cloths. This reverence shows that even in the physical transportation of God's things, there was holiness and order. Already the Merari were in charge of the heavy structured pillars, bases, crossbars, and stakes of the tabernacle. Their camp was at north, and their work required strength and endurance. They weren't visible as much, but without them, the tabernacle wouldn't stand. What do we learn from this? That in the kingdom of God, there is room for both the preacher and the wood carrier, and both are equally necessary for the work to happen. Finally, Moses, Aaron, and their sons set up camp at Teest, at the entrance of the tabernacle, as a kind of spiritual sentinels. They represented divine authority and leadership, ready to intercede for the people. The location of each group indicated not only practical functions, but also spiritual positions. No one was lost in the desert. Everyone knew their place, their calling, and their direction. And that's how the people moved forward with identity and clarity. In addition to setting apart the Levites for sacred service, God also established an age criterion for active work: 30 to 50 years old. This may seem like a mere technicality, but it reveals divine wisdom. Between these ages, man already has maturity, physical strength, and discernment, essential characteristics for dealing with what washily and heavy. In other words, sacred service requires preparation, not improvisation. In this new census, each Levitical group was counted again. Now focusing on the work in the tabernacle meeting wasn't enough to be a Levite. You had to be in the right stage of life to serve. This teaches us something profound. There's a time for everything. Sometimes we want to carry the tabernacle before it's time, or we insist on continuing when it's time to train others. God respects the pace of maturity and mission. The division of labor was extremely clear. The Kohanim took care of the transportation of the most sacred objects, but only after the priests covered them with veils. The Gersonian kept the lighter parts, like curtains and cloths. As for the Merari, faced the most manual labor with heavy structures. Each role had the same spiritual value, even though it required different skills. This eyes excellence with purpose. And the lesson here is powerful. God doesn't expect you to do everything, expects you to do well what He's entrusted to you. Whether it's intercession, cleaning, teaching, or welcoming, we all have a part in the body. The secret is to do it with zeal, at the right time, and with the right heart. With this level of organization and honor, the people were ready to walk in holiness. But first, they needed to ensure that the camp was pure. Have you ever noticed how, in the Bible, God cares about the surrounding environment before acting with power? In Book of Numbers, before the people advanced into the desert, God gave a clear order. The camp needed to be pure. This included removing lepers, people with impure discharge, and anyone who had touched the dead. At first glance, It may seem like just a sanitary measure, but it was much more. It was a matter of sanctity of the sanctuary. The presence of God was in the center of the camp, in the tabernacle of meeting, and this required a high standard. It wasn't about exclusion based on prejudice, but about spiritual protection. Everything that contaminated or symbolized death was temporarily removed until the person was purified. God wanted to show that life with him requires cleanliness external and internal. It was like preparing the environment for the miracle to happen freely. This leads us to a powerful reflection. What kinds of impure things have we tolerated in the camp of our hearts? Sometimes they are thoughts, habits, or hurts that seem small, but which impede the flow of God's presence. Just as Israel needed to remove impurity before the march, we also need to remove what separates us from his voice. Holiness is not perfection, it is separation. And that starts with practical, everyday decisions. If you want to live the miracles in the desert, you need to take care of the environment where the presence lives. This applies to your home, your work, your circle of friends. God continues to act where there is purity in the camp. And this concern for holiness also extended to interpersonal relationships. After all, how can a people be kept united if there is injustice among brothers? In the next step, we will see how God dealt with sins against others with seriousness and justice. On a long and challenging journey, conflicts between people were inevitable. Therefore, God established specific laws regarding sins against one's neighbor. And here is a detail that many ignore. God didn't just accept requests for forgiveness, he demanded it. Restitution. That's right. If someone stole, cheated, or caused harm, they had to pay it back. Everything that was taken, plus 20 justice with interest. This law shows how much God values others as much as he values worship. There is no point in offering sacrifice in tabernacle of meeting if the heart is full of dishonesty. Spiritual life and social life go hand in hand. And what's more, the victim of the loss had already died and had no heirs. The restitution was given to the priest. It was like saying nothing can remain unrepaired before the God of justice. How often today do we see people trying to hide their mistakes with pretty speeches? In the desert, there was no way to cover up. God wanted transparency, truth, and reparation. It's the kind of principle that still resonates today. Did you make a mistake? Fix it. Did you cause harm? Fix it. Did you regret it? Prove it with your actions. Divine justice does not aim at pure punishment, but relationship restoration. And that starts with humility. What if this principle were alive in our churches, businesses, and families? How much healing would happen if people not only asked for forgiveness, but also refund with an increased? God is love. Yes, but he is also just, and he cares about how we treat one another. With this, Israel was learning that justice began at home. But what about when the pain wasn't visible, but rather a suspicion? Next, we'll look at one of the most mysterious and controversial rituals in the Bible. Woman suspected of adultery. Among the many instructions of the book of Numbers, one of the most intriguing is the ritual for the woman suspected of adultery. When the husband doubted his wife's fidelity but had no proof, he would take her to the priest, who would perform a strange and delicate procedure with the so-called bitter waters. This ritual was not to condemn, but to reveal the truth, a way to seek divine justice where doubt ran rampant. The woman drank water mixed with dust from the tabernacle floor and ashes from a burned red cow. If she was innocent, nothing happened to her, and she remained purified. But if she was guilty, the consequence was dire, indicating that she had broken the marriage covenant. This procedure reinforced the importance of purity in the camp and the need for trust and transparency in relationships within God's people. While the ritual may seem strange and even harsh to our modern eyes, it reveals how seriously God took justice and holiness within the camp. No hiding places or false appearances. The search for truth was urgent, because sanctity of the sanctuary reflected the sanctity of the people and families. This is a message that spans a century's. Transparency and justice go hand in hand. We can learn then that doubt cannot reign where there must be faith and commitment, and that true justice is not human, full of passions, but divine, caring, and precise. Today in our lives and relationships, we can seek the same justice with love and truth, allowing God to reveal what needs healing. But before moving forward, it's worth remembering this desert journey isn't just about difficult trials, it's also about hope, promise, and faith in the future. Let's discover how all of this points to the long-awaited land of Canaan. Now that you know the secrets behind organization, holiness, and discipline in the book of Numbers, how about reflecting how is your journey going? Have you been fulfilling your mission with the same obedience and zeal? What adjustments can you make to avoid getting lost in the desert of life? If this content touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with anyone who needs this word. Let's continue this journey of transformation together, learning to walk with God toward our promised land.